Well, hello there, listeners, and welcome to the Soul in Business podcast. I am your host, Trish Murray, exploring the domains of value, communication, relationship, and legacy, and so much more in order to recapture the soul of business in this new age of Aquarius. In this episode, I invite Tovey Blake into a conversation about the teeter-totter most of us are standing on right now, carrying a sense of heaviness as we grapple with the unfolding events in our world while practicing soul care to protect and to amplify the legacy that we want to leave behind inside of our business and beyond. So stay with me and Tovey for our conversation about soul care. So here's an interesting sidebar before I get into the full conversation with Tovey. As I was putting some notes together from this podcast and really considering what the mind break would be at the midpoint, two words came into focus. And I almost renamed the podcast around this. Those two words were come together. Why it's interesting is that a full month prior to Tovey and I connecting and even entertaining the notion about this conversation, I started to write a piece titled Come Together. When I sat down to write that piece, I was staring at the precipice that humanity is moving towards, characterized by things like out of control inflation, an over-reliance on technology, escalating global tensions, the degradation of a lot of our core systems, which we have come to trust, from government to healthcare to education, banking, finance, and more. As I considered all that I was seeing and feeling, this sense of certainty rose up within me that the only way forward for humanity is for us to find our way to come together. The only way humanity finds its way out of this mess that none of us really have any idea how to fix and forward into something better that few of us really have a strong vision around. The only way out, the only way forward is if we find a way to come together. It's interesting to me because, as you'll hear at the midpoint, mind break, that was what really landed for me as I considered Tovey and I's conversation. So without further ado, the one and only Tovey Blake. You hear?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Trish. How are you?
Oh, I'm so good. I am good. I am good mostly because I declared October, and if you're listening to this in replay, October 2023, I declared this to be Soul Care Month.
Love that.
So
I
have kind of been preparing to talk a little bit about what that means. So I've been putting myself into a very intentional soul care practice even more intentional than I normally would. So, notwithstanding, the crazy shit show that we're living in right now in the world, I am actually feeling pretty good. How are you doing?
You know what? I think I'm on the fence I don't want to say I'm feeling the worst, but I'm not feeling the best either. As I said, I think for me, I'm feeling the heaviness that everybody, I think that I know, at least in my close circle, is kind of feeling right now. Mm-hmm. And I know that I'm definitely trying to find ways to stay motivated. I'm still pushing through every day because that's just who I am. But obviously my mind goes to those people right now that are having the challenges of pushing through, right? Or just can't find the energy or, the focus to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I am so grateful for your candor and your honesty, Tovey. And listener, don't get me wrong. There are days where I feel like I'm, struggling to get out of bed in the morning. But in the same token, that has characterized the last 10 years for me. And so I feel like I've been out, I'm coming out from underneath some of that heaviness, seeing things a little differently. And so, you know, uh, you know, I want to encourage you guys, if you're listening to this, to, take some time. It's Soul Care Month. If you're listening to this in October when I release this, it's Soul Care Month. What do you need to do to be able to take care of not so much yourself, but your soul? And Tovey and I were talking about it in the pre-show that, I think maybe we even need to change the language away
Yes.
from self-care, because that seems to have gotten a bad rap somewhere along the line. Right, Tovey? We were saying how we've heard self-care for 20 years, and all I look around and see is more burnout and more
Oh, I
exhaustion.
totally agree. I totally agree. And you know what it is that I feel to myself, maybe because I really kind of try to adapt self-care so late in my life that I have such a hard concept of it because it logically does not make, honestly, it doesn't make sense to me. I feel like self-care, when I hear those words, I feel like it's just something else for me to do, not
Mhm.
something to enjoy.
Yeah,
And I don't think
absolutely.
that's really the intention of it.
Well, I would agree. I would agree with that. Both personally, having experienced what I've experienced over the last decade or so, I've said to people, I've spent more time in burnout than I have out of it. So I'm very familiar with how it can just feel like, oh my gosh, it's just more duty, more obligation. It's just one more thing.
Mhm.
I gotta schedule in self-care. Okay, sure.
Yes. It's the scheduling of looking at your calendar and scheduling that self-care and
Yeah.
not feeling bad of watching everything around it or not looking at a to-do list. It just, as I said, self-care for me just hasn't been what I think for most people that have, I guess, have been doing it for a while and it's become part of their lifestyle, right? But as I said, I've adapted it in a later part of my life where it's not that easy for me just to
Hmm.
go say, go take care of yourself, Toby, go put
Hmm.
yourself for like conceptually, I don't understand that. And it has a lot to do, I think, of just my design makeup too.
Yeah. Well, we can go back. We can come back to that because we've talked about your design, but let's just. I'd like to pause because you're a mom, right? I think that
Yeah.
parents have a really a kind of, I don't want to say an uphill battle when it comes to understanding self care or in integrating self care, but I do think it does make it harder.
I think for me, anything that's not planned for me, personally for me is considered to be self-care. If I have to schedule it, I'm going to feel like it's a task, it feels like a chore, it's gonna feel like work.
Mm. Hmm.
And I think it can be challenging for people because I'm really sometimes most of my life haven't been a spontaneous person because I have been a parent. So I've always had to have plan A to Z. You know what
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean? There was no room for spontaneity. Like spontaneity meant for me like, maybe my daughter's going to be walking out of the house with no underwear today because it's just like I don't have time for that. Like, you know what I mean? It
Right.
has to be
Yeah.
like I'm getting up at this time, got to make sure her clothes are laid out. So now I have to make sure, but you're right. The one key word that I love that you said, Trish, it's intentional
Mm.
because you have to make it intentional because as I said, I think for me, this is why I'm feeling all of this heaviness because I haven't made it intentional. I've made it intentional to take every bit care of everybody else, thinking to myself, that's going to feed me and nurture me because that's how it's been for the majority of my life,
Hmm.
whether it be
Hmm.
in personal or been in work. But that's no longer fulfilling me. That's no longer nurturing to me.
Right. Yeah. In fact, it might even start to feel like a burden, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm curious just even about that um because I did make some pretty extreme choices for myself over the
Hmm.
last 12 or 10 or 12 years. And, I've said to a number of people a number of times, like, that some of the things that I've done, there is no way I will ever, like, even put them out in the world, because I just don't want anybody to think that that's a recommendation, right?
Yeah.
It's not, because but that should be I guess, a bit of a clue for listeners as to just how burned out I was. Like, because
Yeah.
I took it to the extreme in one way, burned out. So I feel like I had to take it to the extreme in order to be able to restore myself. And it took a long time. It took a long, long time. And so first of all, I want to just so we're changing the language. It's no longer self-care, it's soul care. It's soul care.
Yes, I
That's how
love
I'm
that.
referring to that.
I love that. I love that because I feel like you're talking from such a different place of like, because that's where, if you think about it, I feel like everything between your spirit and your soul, that's where the foundation really needs to start from, right? And I feel like if you don't take care of those places, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter what you feed into. It's not going to necessarily be an enjoyable experience, or you're necessarily not going to feel that joy. And I think when it gets to that point, that's how you're talking about. You get to that point of burnout. You can possibly get to the point of resentment, even of
A
like, why am I
100%.
doing this? Like, I don't want to do this. Like, yeah, you don't want to answer emails, you don't want to pick up calls, like, and I'm just being 110% real because
Love it.
I'm going through spurts of this right now where it's just like, I love my clients, don't get me wrong, but it's just like, I need to breathe.
Mhm.
I just need to stop and breathe. I don't want nobody to need anything from me. I just want to sit with myself. And sometimes I think it's necessary. Like, I don't think I've ever realized more than ever. I remember I wrote a blog a few years ago about just pausing and resetting.
Mhm.
And it's funny how sometimes the things that we need to do, like how you're saying, like how October is like, your soul care month. It's like every day should really be that, but it's just so how easy we forget, right? Like, I know they always say it takes this many amount of days to start a new habit and whatever the
Mhm.
case may be,
Mhm.
but that's if everybody's structured the same. I'm
Correct.
not structured that way. You see what I'm saying? So, like, as you're saying, it took you 12 years, and I totally get that because nothing for me, personally, for me, that has to do with putting myself first is easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I think some of that is maybe a little bit about how, like we've talked about our soul styles, our unique
Yep.
soul style, and the way that we're kind of divinely wired. And I say
Yep.
that knowing that everything I find in my soul style and in other people's is I see it as, this is what we came here for. This is what we came here to experience and to learn and to
Mhm.
integrate and possibly to share, depending on where we are in our
Yes.
journey. But yeah, I mean, I don't. It took me some time to wrestle with the idea that on some part of my soul
Mhm.
wanted to really come here and learn what it meant to embody self-love,
Mm. I
because
love
that's a
that.
big part of my soul style. It's one of my primary drivers, is learning how to embody, just absolutely loving the vessel that my soul is taking this journey through, and caring for it and
Yes.
nurturing it and creating space for it.
Yeah. I totally, totally agree with that. And that's the thing about it, is creating that space for it. You know what I mean? Of like, and I think I feel like, especially to like, we had the pandemic, and then
Yeah.
it was kind of like the world was almost shut down for 2 years, right? And
Mhm.
then all of a sudden it was just like, there was just this release, but I feel like there was no preparation for that release because it was like such a start and go, start and go. sorry, yeah, you can do this. Oh, sorry, no, you can't. Guess
Right.
what, guys? You can do it again. No, you
Mhm.
can't.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden it was just like, go. And I
Yeah.
feel like everybody was just trying to like just figure themselves out all over again with no guidance. And I feel like on top of everything else that's happening with the economy and this, that, and the other thing, I feel like that has flowed into this as well, which
Yeah.
is why I think my exhaustion, more mental and I think emotional than anything, is coming from.
And I would again, Tovey, you're singing my song, girl, because everything that I just talked about with our soul style. Yeah, there's some things that we came here intentionally to learn, but I think that one thing that nobody's really talking a lot about is the impact of our culture on us.
Yes.
And we can get into the whole debate about who created the culture, but it doesn't matter right now. Really, what you just described was, you know, a kind of a bigger part of the puzzle that I had to go
Yeah.
and figure out, right? I had to figure out over the last 10 years, maybe 12, that that I was not taught the things that I needed to be taught. I did not learn the things I needed to learn in order to truly navigate life.
Yeah. I
And I
totally
didn't
get that.
learn, yeah, and I didn't learn how to navigate the things that you just described, right? We weren't
Mhm.
gently brought into COVID, and
No.
neither were we gently brought out of it. We weren't
No.
coached into it. We weren't coached out of it. And I'm sure that people, if you're working with coaches, maybe there was a little bit of that happening for you, but really and truly, like when you really step back and look at kind of our world, my opinion, that's all it is that the things
Yeah.
that we learn and the things that we're taught, they are not the things that we actually need in order to be able to navigate life, navigate the
No.
world, navigate this journey. And it kind of seems so crazy to me. So that's what I spent a lot of time going and learning. And I feel like maybe that's what's coming through in this heaviness right now is, there's a lot of
Mhm.
people are sort of maybe in that same place. Um,
Yeah,
so
amen to that. Amen to that. I totally feel what you're saying about everything that you just said because I think a lot of, you know, my upbringing too hadn't prepared me for a lot of things, and even with my daughter, like, there's no handbook to parenthood, definitely, but there's
none.
definitely no handbook to life. And I feel like, your parents do the best that they can based on what they know and where the
Yeah.
time that they're from, right? So for me, my life was just different growing up. So you're right. I didn't have the tools to navigate. And I actually am very concerned about like these kids, like in this
Mm.
generation right now. Like, I don't understand what the things I feel like I graduated. I'm going to age myself here a little bit, Trish, but I graduated from high school in 1995. Okay. So, and I do not feel like high school prepared me at all, regardless if I was a teen mom or not, for what was for adulting at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. And I was like a decade before you. And I can guarantee you that I didn't feel like I came out any more ready. And I have
No.
nieces that are, a decade after you, and they would tell me the exact same thing. I was so unprepared for this adulting bullshit.
Yep. Yeah,
Right?
it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like it's overwhelming because like especially now I was having an adult daughter and seeing her go through it and like,
Yeah.
I work hard in order for her to be able to have the opportunity to have these experiences that I didn't have. But like shit's real. Like when you get out there, like there's no going back. There's no like reverting back to like a reverse thing of
Hmm.
Benjamin Button. You
No.
keep going forward and you keep getting older and as much as you want, like I think for me that's why I've been so dead set, like, and very intentional about this woman building legacies because my legacy cannot be the legacy that my mom left for herself. It cannot be
Right.
the legacy
Okay.
that my grandma, my mom's mom, even my dad's mom left for themselves. You know what I mean? Like, it's very, very important to me that, like, I leave something behind that is memorable enough and useful enough and valuable enough that somebody can take that with them and it will help them.
I love that. And so you were saying on the pre-call that, you know, you've just been spending some time in contemplation or considering you know, what that ends up looking like for you. So let's talk a little bit first about, you know, women building legacies and what is that for you?
Well, I think for me, the idea really came out of, having my daughter, but I think mostly just from generational things that, you experience. And especially for me, I've really been on a healing journey for about the last 3 years, and it's had its ups and downs, but it's been really revealing to me. And from a cultural aspect, I'm born in Canada, but my parents are from the Caribbean.
Hmm.
And there was just certain things that, like, and as I said, I love my parents, and they did their best, you know what I mean? But it was just never instilled in me to really build a legacy that's beyond money. Like, I feel like that's what everybody's mind is on, is like money, like how you're talking about the culture. Like, money and success have
Hmm.
equated to the same thing. And
Right.
I have never been that person. And I don't know, like, I've never suffered in the sense of, I've never had my lights turned off, thank
Hmm.
God, or any of those things. I feel like I've been very blessed in that, and God has really shown me favor that I've never suffered to that extent. But at the same time, too, He's given me strength. I work hard for all of that stuff to happen.
Right.
But I feel like if I had more guidance of understanding that money doesn't equal success, I would probably be a lot happier in my life than I am right now, if I'm gonna be honest.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and so you know, we talked about the heaviness, and the heaviness is there, and I think the heaviness will be there either individually
Mhm.
until we find something that outweighs the heaviness, right? Like you're on a teeter
Yep,
totter. And right now, that teeter totter is going in one direction. And I think individually, until each one of us finds something that has more heft to
yep,
balance that scale, we'll stay in that space. And I can say that because I live that. But the encouraging side of it is I you know, finding those pieces that do just that balance the scale. So I think the women building legacies and thinking for
yep,
yourself about, you know, what is success for me, and what is, like,
yep,
you know, what is the purpose of money? You know, I actually have been down that path of not necessarily having things turned off, but getting to a place of just fighting and struggling. I've had it. I've
yep,
had loads of it, and I've had none of it, and I've had loads of it, and I've had none of
yep.
it.
It's a cycle,
And
right?
right,
Mhm.
and what I have absolutely concluded is the carrot that culture
Mm,
has taught us to believe that it is money. What I mean by
yep,
that, and I'm a
yep,
big fan of Wallace Wattles and his book The Science of Getting Rich, and a lot of his thinking and philosophy in that. I embrace all of it, and at the same time, in the times when I had very, very little, I think life was simpler in some
yes.
ways. It was
Oh my
simpler,
gosh.
and it was I don't want to say it was easier, but I found a way to really enjoy the simple pleasures of
Yes.
life, right? And
I a
I
const Oh,
yeah.
thank you for so much for saying that, because honestly, it's so nostalgic for you saying that, because I have a one friend that, I was born in Ontario here, but I lived the majority of my life in Edmonton, and when I moved into in a subsidized apartment, there ended up being a mutual friend of another friend that ended up living below me. And we always reminisce, like, the fact that we had so little.
Mhm.
Like, he'd come and borrow, he'd be like, Tovey, I need to borrow this, I get paid next week, or I'd go down. Do you have this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But man, did we enjoy, did we laugh? Like, it was just different. I'm like, and we both said like we would both go back to those times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you just keyed in on something else that I would say was a major takeaway for me too is, and it's not that I don't have great relationships now or I didn't have great relationships,
Mm,
at other points in my life, right? But like those moments where I had, again, listener, pardon my language, I didn't have a pot to piss in.
yep.
Those were the times when, first of all, I knew who was real in my life and who wasn't. And
Yep.
the relationships that I had then, they were strong and they were sort of foundational for me. And I'm not, like I said,
Yeah.
I'm not saying I didn't have those same kinds of relationships when I had it during the periods of time when I have lots of money, but it's not about that. It's about recognizing that, money changes things and it can either change it for the good
Absolutely.
or it can change it for the bad. I think that it's not making things easy for people to find lightness right now because there's so much pressure financially
Yep.
for people right now. And at the same time, I guess I just keep looking for what are the things that can be encouraging for us right now. For me, it's been, relationships and the ones that have lasted, the ones that
Yep.
have stood the test of time,
I totally agree.
and how to
I
create
totally agree.
simplicity, right? And how to find those
Yeah.
moments of simplicity. So let's take a pause and create some space in our minds to listen for what our soul wants us to hear about slowing down for soul care. Take a breath, hold it at the top for a moment, and exhale. Stay with your breath for the next 60 seconds. Okay, let's come back for more with Tovey Blake.
Has been really supportive and encouraging to me. And I know this is actually falling out of my routine. Because for me, and can't speak for other people, but I know work has always been kind of an escape for me when I'm going through things. So it's just like when I'm going through things, I'm working even harder, I'm working even longer. And for the last couple weeks, like I have been going to my community center. I'm going 2 times a week. I'm going in 3-hour blocks, like, and I'm loving it. And that's like, and I come home. Usually I would come back and I'd work for another few hours. I'm like, nope, come home, get a shower, turn on the TV. And it's just the breaking up of my routine and not
Huge.
actually responding to things that people need and really actually being like, do I need to do this right now? That's a big question I've been asking myself a lot. Trish is like, do I need to do this right now? And this is the things I've been finding joy in. And it seems so weird, but it's been so enjoyable because it's so not me.
Do I need to do this right now? It's one of my actual favorites is what do we need right now? What do we need next? And what will we need in the near future? Even if you can ask that question that far out, and what is the near future? It could be like 5 days, right? But
Yep.
the querying, the questioning, and the breaking up of the routine again, like I am so excited for you, Tovey, because that has been the 10 years is changing the routine, changing the patterns and recognizing which patterns I had myself in that were not working, that weren't working. And
Yeah.
so I'm getting together with a group to talk about the soul care stuff this week. And so one of the things that I had said I'm going to share with them, and I'll share with you guys right now, is, crowdsource what you can do in order to create a different routine. And this does two things. Number one, it crowdsources, what you can do, but it also creates relationship with people. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, when I think back to one of the things that I was probably most angry about when it came to COVID and the 3 years of whatever that was how it impacted people's human relationships.
Yeah.
Like people,
absolutely.
It's still something that, when I sit and think about it, when I allow myself to sit and think about it, it makes me very angry. And so it also is something that I recognize, and it brings me back to what is the thing that I truly value the most. Well, I value relationships and good ones, right? I value being around people
Absolutely.
that are helpful.
Yeah, and that are healthy. You know what I mean? Because that's the whole thing about it. It is like I feel like sometimes, or right now, there's a lot of toxicity, right? Like even at my age, I'm growing out of friendships that I've had for like literally the majority of my life, some of them in childhood. And it is what it is. You know what I mean? Like I don't look at it as a bad thing. I just look at it as part of the growing,
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree with the relationships aspect. I think for me, a lot of the reason why I pushed myself, especially for the last little while, and I think it has to do with the progression that I'm on with my healing journey, because during that pandemic, my mom got cancer. My mom ended up passing away.
Right.
And I'm telling you, that hits you different when you only have one mom. And trust me, my mom's relationship wasn't perfect, but if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't even be here having this conversation with you. So I give her the respect that she deserves
100%.
for just that. But I'm telling you, Trish, that totally changed my whole viewpoint about relationships. And that I think has what has driven me so hard for probably the last 2 years after the pandemic, of really wanting to help my clients build that space of making time for the people that they love, because you cannot get that time back. And I stress this so much to them. It's like, you cannot get that time back. Like once it's finished, it is finished.
Once it's over, once they're gone, it's done. And
it's done.
I'd love to chat a little bit about the work that you do, just because this is another thing that I think tips the balance on that that seesaw, that teeter-totter, right? Is being able to find the things that add meaning to our life, right? And I 100, this is what soul of business means to me, is being able to put our soul right into the work, the career, the job, business, whatever, and allowing that to be reflected back through all of the things that we're doing in that particular realm. And of course, every other realm of our life. But so let's talk a little bit about the work that you do and how you got into it.
I had never had the intention of really working for myself, because going back to us talking about even why the main reasons why I built, like what I'm trying to do with Women Building Legacies is just that I never planned on working for myself. My mindset, based on what I was taught in school, based on how I grew up, you go to school, right? You get the education. That means you're going to get the good job. Womp womp. Yep. That is a farce. That's bullshit. Excuse my language. But it's lies.
You can go ahead and swear all you like here.
Yeah, it's lies. It's propaganda. So I actually had been working for a company, a utilities company. I was slaving myself, plus I was working a part-time job. Like, since I had my daughter, I had never been in a situation where I never had just one full-time job. At times I was doing one full-time job, one part-time job, going to school full-time, sometimes going part-time, like always going since I had my daughter. So in 2015, my daughter graduated from high school. and she was going to university. And for me, I was like, I know that I need to supplement my income, but I was like, I don't want to be out of the home anymore. Like, I just felt like I needed to be there for her because this was going to be such a big transition for her. And I was just like, I need to make myself available. And so I literally had started a new full-time job somewhere else. And I sat at my computer, had always, my background is in like office administration. So over the years, I wrote resumes for my friends. I never charged for them because I'm just like, man, whatever. I enjoy doing it. It's going to help you get a job. Cool. And then so I was going to do a Kijiji ad, and I was like, all right, I'm going to do something for resume writing. And it was just so weird because I was on my lunch break at work, and I just honestly felt something come over me. And it's like this whisper I tell people, it was just like saying something bigger, bigger. And it just like that just kept being a word that was whispered in my ear. And by time at the end of my lunch hour, I was signing up to open up my own business as a sole proprietor. And that's how I pretty much got started.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
and that's, yeah. So this is why I tell people, like, I really truly believe that my business is not my own. I feel like it is a means to really what God has planned for me, for my life, in order to whatever his purpose is for me. So it
Yeah.
really is just a stepping stone of just how I feel like women building legacies is the next part of that. And who's to know, something will come after that, but it's all connected, you know? And so, as I said, when I first started, I was doing resume writing. I was doing, business solutions. I would go to places. I wasn't all remote working. Sometimes I'd work for property management companies and go do minutes, this, that, and the other thing. And then probably about the end of my second year, I was so burnt out. Like, I'd be visiting Edmonton, going back and forth, visiting my family, and they were getting mad at me because they're like, are you going to actually spend time with us? Because you're constantly working on resumes, doing this. And I was just so exhausted. And I remember I turned to my daughter, said, I think I just have to like wrap this up. Like, I'm done. And she's like, Mom, she's like, no, you're not doing that. And that's when I kind of just really started to like scale down and really figure out what I needed to do. Like, when I first started my business, and if there's anybody listening to this that is going to start their business, my one piece of advice I have to give to you is that you do not have to offer services just because you're good at them. That was the biggest mistake that I made, Trish, because I thought I had to offer everything that I was good at because I needed to make money. And that was the other biggest mistake. Never, ever, ever take work because of money. And if there's anything that we were going to talk about soul care, that would be, I think, a good example, because that definitely will break your soul.
Absolutely, because you end up working with people who are not your people.
You know what I mean? Like, you get it,
I
right?
do.
So I think for me, a couple years ago, I finally came to the realization that where my love comes in is like processes, automation, systems of really organizing people. And I really think that came from, I was able to come to that place also too because of everything that was going on with my mom. Because had I not had systems and processes and all of these things in place, I wouldn't have been able to download information to people in order for my business to still continue to run while I was at my mom having her surgery, and my mom going to chemo treatments with her, and all of those things that I had to be at the hospital every day for however many weeks, and
Right. Yeah.
other appointments. And you know what I mean? So for me, that's where the love of what I do, operations, anything related to business processes, because to me, it's all about giving people their time back and making that time valuable, quality, like whatever that looks like to you, like, because I've always believed that family's not always blood, right? So my main thing is I just want you to be able to have the time to do the things that you want to do. And like, if you're saying that you're off, I want to be that person that you're really off. You're not sending emails or answering text messages on the side. Like, you're
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that, I think, comes back to everything that we've been talking about already, which is, how do you get out of the heaviness? Well, maybe there is some stuff that needs to be offloaded. Maybe you need to be getting yourself out of some of the things that you're doing because, first of all, you're not good at it. So it's taking you 6 times as long as you thought it should. And you're not doing the things that you are great at. And like, it just, the list goes on and on and on.
Right, exactly.
It does. Because I see it with business owners every day, all day. The wrestling match, and I see it in myself, the wrestling match that we all go through with being able to let go of some things to someone else who is going to do them better. And we're either having the money conversation with us. And now I'm not saying that the money conversation isn't legitimate, right? Where we get ourselves into spending before there's revenue to support it. But at the same time, there are some things that when we know that we should be doing this because we know that this is what's going to actually either A, give us back our life, or B, enable us to grow the contribution that we're making through the work. Those are some soul questions. Those are some hard soul questions to be having.
These are really some hard soul questions because I feel like everybody that's like a business owner, even if you're still an employee, we're all at like different journeys in our life, right? And I feel like over the years, obviously my priorities have changed, and especially too when my daughter obviously has become less dependent on me. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and that was a hard shift in my life too, is like when she started university, she decided that it was too much for her to commute back and forth from where we lived to where her university was. And this girl went and signed a lease and basically told me while we were on Christmas vacation in Edmonton, said, guess what, Mom, I'm moving when I get home in January. Didn't run it by me, didn't say anything, just said, nope, I'm gone.
Okay.
Right? So, you know what I'm saying? And I was just wow. I was just like, as much as I was hurt, I cried, of course, but I was like, damn, I did that?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just like, yeah. And I tell you, my daughter has been one of the biggest inspirations to me because I feel like everything that I wish got downloaded in me, did my best to download in her. And I'm starting to see the dividends of that. And that's what legacy is for me.
I love that. That is legacy for sure. Like out of all the other things that we could consider put a label on around legacy, leaving the next generation in a better place than what we found it. Oh my God. Like that in and of itself. And that again is, it's a tough thing for me right now to look around our world and to answer that question. Are we leaving the next generation in a better place? And I'm not just talking about the environment, and I'm not talking about climate change. I'm talking about socially, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, all of it, physically. Are we leaving them healthier than what we even found it? And honestly, that's what causes me to feel heavy some days. Is because I'm just not sure that we are.
I definitely agree with you. Like, I feel like I remember my mom always used to say to me, like, people always used to tell her I was like an old soul. And even she said that about my daughter. And I never really understood what she said, what she meant, the way that like the world is where we are in the world. But there's some positive to it, but there's some stuff that's so scary. And I think the scariest part for me, to be honest, Trish, where I think the downfall is the amount of garbage that's ingested between social media, and you can't even trust news anymore. Like, I remember back in the day, you used to be able to watch news no matter what channel it was. Like, the most like garbage you were getting is like the National Enquirer, and you actually had to buy that paper, like go and buy it.
Yes.
Remember?
Yes, I do.
Right? But you'd actually be able to watch news and know to yourself it's legit.
Yeah.
Now you have news that you can't even trust. Then on top of it, you have social media that's on some
Steroids.
next level of like, I don't even know what to say, And that's where I think part of where as we're talking about soul care, that's one of the things that I've been intentional about since last month of really what I'm ingesting, what I'm listening to. Like, I'm a person that I need to have background noise when I'm working, but I've been very intentional about what I'm listening to, even if it is background noise, and what I like listen to or watch before I go to bed, when I wake up in the morning,
Yeah.
just, and those are the little things that have made a difference and do make me happy.
You know,
And
it's
especially
interesting
too
that
when
you
I'm,
say that about social media. So my friend Monica, her and I were
yeah,
talking about, she said this too, but I think she was like 6 months ago that she shared this with me, that before she gets on social media, she actually sets an intention for herself, or she goes into prayer meditation, like 30 seconds. Show me what is beneficial and only what is beneficial for me. And she's
hmm
like, I've been tracking this now. She's got this little experiment going on. She's like, every time I do this, it it is really quite amazing for her to see what is showing up in her feed, and most importantly, what is not, because she has set
yeah,
the intention for it. She's
I love
she's
that.
moved into that space of being very present as she's walking herself into that experience. As Tovey and I are talking about the next generation, and my definition of the next generation is anybody born after the year 2000, right? So they're probably about mid 20s and younger, right?
Yeah. hmm
Anybody who was born in the year 2000 and later, I feel like the times that we are living in right now is going to be either their greatest galvanizer, like it will galvanize them into their soul's purpose for being here. Or, yes, there's also the opposite side of that, where they could get lost in it all. They could end up losing themselves in the midst of all that's going on right now. But one of the things that I called out to this group was that when you look at the numerology of the year 2000 and everything that surrounds that, it's got 3 zeros. Right. So the year 2000, anybody who
Okay.
was born in the year 2000 got 3 zeros. And anytime you have a 0 in your birth date, anytime that shows up in your month, day, or year, what it really is suggesting is that there's openness to the spiritual nature of our world, the spiritual nature of our existence. That's what the zeros kind of represent in numerology, as I understand
Yeah.
numerology. And so when you look at anybody who is kind of being born right now, they've got at least 1 0 because until we get to 2100, and even then, right? So you can see how the numbers start to work, right? Write out your birth
Yeah.
date, you can start to see this. The other side of it is the 2, which again, in numerology, my understanding of numerology, the 2 is a representation of that innate, inherent sensitivity and intuition. Now, sensitivity makes complete sense to me because I see so much of the generation looking for ways to tune out. And in my opinion, that's all this is. That makes complete sense to me because the world that we see right now is a very challenging place to be for people who are highly sensitive, who are maybe even borderline or full-on empathic, and they don't know that about themselves. And of
Yep.
course, if you don't know, or you're not sort of accepting that sensitivity aspect of who you are, or maybe you don't know that you're empathic or how to have that higher level intuition, if you're not tuned into that, if you don't really see that in yourself, the world is going to feel very overwhelming, right? But at the same time, my personal opinion is that there is such profound potential in this generation just because of when they were born, And, when you start to look at sort of even just their human design, because I'm working with some of the youngers now about, their human design, and it's
I'm sure you're finding some
breathtaking.
interesting things. I
It's
can't
breathtaking.
imagine.
It's
It absolutely
breathtaking.
is. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like if this generation evolves the way that and it progresses and kind of breaks up what's going on right now. I'm
Which they have
very
the power to
interested.
do.
Yes, they absolutely do. And I look forward to, like, I probably won't be here for it, but it's going to be amazing of what could be for even the generations after them. Because as you said, like, this is a different time of, like, I can't explain it, but you're right. Like, this energy is like, it's either there's no in between, if it makes sense. It's like a make it or break it. Like, it's either gonna go great or it's gonna go all to hell. You know what I
Well,
mean?
yeah,
So I'm just
yeah. I can see
I'm
that.
really
And I'm not laughing because I'm finding it funny, because I'm not, you guys, like, I'm really not. But at the same time,
but
remember that this has been 12 years of
yeah,
pushing myself and pulling myself through the muck and the mud and the rabbit holes to get to a
yes.
place of being able to hear Tovey say it's either going to go all to hell or it's going to be amazing, right?
Yeah,
And
like
yeah,
yeah. I've only really understood over the last couple of years that I am highly sensitive and I'm empathic. So I thought, for so long there was just everything wrong with me, right? Because of whatever.
yeah.
Because that's just what I
And
thought. Because everybody's just like, you're too sensitive and nobody can
yeah.
talk to you because you're always crying, or like, why you like this, why you like
Oh
that.
my
And it's
God.
just, yeah, right. So
I
why are
can
you
feel
sick? Why?
this, Tovey, because I have a sister that would say the exact same thing.
Right. So I'm
Yeah.
just like, okay. So then you just learn to internalize that. Right. And it's very, like, I have found it as, again, this has been part of my own healing, right? That I've had to understand, like, people didn't know better, you know, and some of them still don't accept or understand it, and that's fine. But for me, it's important for me to understand that there's nothing wrong with me, and
Yeah.
anybody else that's listening and learning about themselves. I know it's a journey. And if you feel to yourself that, like, you are that person where you can feel that energy from other people and it feels like you're taking on stuff, you really need to be able to embrace that in a way that it's healthy and it doesn't overwhelm and overtake you, because it can
Yeah.
be overwhelming
Yeah.
if you do not know
100%.
how to manage it.
Yeah. And so I would add on to that. The best thing that I can encourage people to do is, soul protection practices, energetic protection practices. And I'm talking about, simple things like, before you go out the door, just imagine yourself zipping up your energy field, right? That's something so simple and so easy we can do. But you can also go and get, a level 1 Reiki certification, like learn how to use Reiki for yourself. And the more that you do that, it's a game changer. And this is, I think, what we're going to start to learn in the next little while is all of these practices, all of this knowledge, all of this wisdom from the ancient traditions. It's going to start to, in my opinion, play a bigger role. And I hope it does, because it plays a huge role for me in my life right now. If you're curious about exploring some of those practices that I just mentioned, each month I share a soul principle or practice that I've found and have worked with over the last 10 or 15 years with members of my community. I'll pop a link below where you can connect with more of those if you're interested. As I kind of say goodbye to Tovey here for this conversation, it's just a conversation, so we'll wind up having another. But to leave you in a space of, being able to move from that heaviness into something that feels lighter. And this concept of feeling lighter was so profound for me over the last 2 or 3 years that, I started to really work with this language of, can you let it be light? And how do you let it be light? So here's my question for you guys on this one is, when are you at your best? When are you at your best? Physically, emotionally, relationally, materially, spiritually? And so I'm going to give you a couple of examples. I am at my best when I am pain-free, when I am strong, and when my body feels flexible. That's what I mean for when am I at my best? What do I feel when I'm at my best? I'm at my best emotionally when I am loving and calm and centered. I know that I am at my best relationally when I am generous, open, and trusting. And I'm at my best spiritually when I am peaceful and purposeful and powerful. Tovey, when are you at your best?
I am at my best when I am putting my needs first before I pour into someone else. I'm at my best when I feel that I am helping somebody to overcome whatever challenges, whether it could be professionally or personally, that they're able to excel in whatever it is that they want to accomplish and help them see life in a different and I hope a brighter way. I feel like I excel honestly when I'm able to laugh at even when it's shit, to put it nicely. I feel like that's when I'm at my best. You know what I mean? And I feel like I'm just at my best when I'm honestly able to have conversations like this where I can be able to be free to speak. I'm able to hear a different point of view. And I feel like that's where I'm at my best because I'm learning. I feel like that's where I'm always at my best, where I'm open to learning, opening to understanding different things, because that's the only way that I can get better. You know, that's the only way that I'm really able to take care, I feel, of my soul, is to be able to learn.
Love it. Love it. I love that so much. Thank you so much for joining me, Tovey. This was a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Trish. I appreciate it.
All right. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I trust that you found a few hidden gems that will help you recapture the soul of business and create more across a life 360 degrees. You'll find links to learn more about Tovey Blake and myself in the show notes below. And of course, if you found something that resonated for you, we would be delighted if you shared this link with someone else in your corner of the world. Until next time, I'm Trish Marie, shining a little bit more light on soul and business in this new age of Aquarius.